and I worked there I was there for about 10 or so years. Um,
Side black, pull it down towards you, it'll advance it.
okay, so we're on the intro, great.
Yeah.
Cool. So as you can see in these slides, I tried to do a little bit of Ozark. I don't know if you guys watch the show Ozark, but in the beginning when they've got the 4 emblems, the 4 clues. I tried to do that for you guys, and also to remind myself what I want to talk about on each of these slides. So anyway, lived in Washington D.C. for a long time. Met the person who became my wife. Her family was here in Colorado, so that's how we ended up here in Colorado about 9 years ago. I spent about 17 years in finance jobs, so that's been the entirety of my career, and so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. But right now, actually, I'm not working, and my life looks more like the picture shown with the guy with the baby, as opposed to the hands working on all the charts. That's what my life looks like now, but it's deliberate, and I enjoy being at home, watching my kids, taking care of my wife, and doing a lot of volunteer work. And talk about that a little later. But nonetheless, I have a lot to share with you about the types of things that I did in finance. And in the last picture, those are the 2 kids that I take care of, my own kids. So a couple different jobs that we're going to talk about today are the ones that I've had. So I first had a real estate finance job where I was in the commercial mortgage industry. We were making mortgages to commercial properties. The next job I had was more in what's called corporate finance. I was working in a finance department of a large publicly traded organization. So still in finance, but a very different job than being a lender. And then most recently, I had a couple jobs in banking where I was once again doing lending, but instead of lending on real estate assets, we were lending to different types of businesses. So that's what I'll talk to you mostly about. And then there's a concept called financial independence, which has the word finance in it, but it's not actually related to career. It's more about managing your own money, and it's something that I'm really into these days. So if we have time, I want to spend a couple minutes on that because I think that could be valuable for you guys. So first we have to talk about what is finance before I talk about the jobs. And it sounds like you had a good presenter last week, so maybe you already know this, maybe you learned some last week. But the way I think for this conversation, the way to think about finance is really just money. I think that's really the easiest way to think about it. So if you as you think about what you want to do in your career, think about, do you have an interest in money? Because that's what I did. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was interested in making money, and I was interested in what was I going to do with that when I made it. And some of that is just selfish. I wanted to be rich. Maybe that was part of it, but I was just interested in money. So you definitely, I think you need that to be successful and to have a sustained career in finance. And then as I was thinking about it and what to share with you guys, I don't think it's written anywhere the types of finance jobs there are, but there are a lot, and I categorize them in 2 ways. The first way is providing money, so being a provider of money, and then the second way is being a manager of money. So towards the bottom of the slide, I just have a lot of buzzwords. Those are basically job titles that you might have seen or you might have heard. You might know someone with those job titles. And they all do different things, but my point in putting them there is to kind of demystify it a little bit. To talk a second about providing money, I mean, we live in a capitalistic culture here in the United States, and it's great, and we have a strong economy, maybe right now this second, but capitalism works very well in this country, and it's all based on the access to money. So you can fulfill your lives, businesses can grow, and things like that. So I feel like finance from that perspective is a very future-proof field from that sense, unless we get a major shift in government or philosophical culture, philosophy in this country. And providing money is done in generally 2 different ways. So either through equity or through debt. And I'm not sure if you guys know what those things mean. I think many adults don't really understand what those are. But providing equity, as I put in the slide, is kind of like what you see on Shark Tank. You guys ever watch Shark Tank? So it's those guys are saying, the contestants come on and say, I have a business, I need help. I'm going to give you some of my company in order for you, in exchange for you giving me money to help grow my business. And that's the way that show works. But and that's the way I think Silicon Valley works and the startup community works. But for the rest of the world, I think the majority of businesses, they get money the other way through debt, which is basically taking on a loan, making a promise to pay that money back, providing collateral, in the sense of their business or the assets of their business. Say, I'm going to pay you this loan back, and if I don't, you can have my business. And so debt, and most companies and even people's balance sheets have more debt than they do equity. And so there are a lot more jobs out there related to debt than there are equity. And that's where my career took me. I ended up in the debt space. And then managing people's money is really more about organizing. So I said I had a job where I was in the finance department of a company. I was basically helping to manage that company's money. So you had a CFO last week. I would categorize that person in the managing side. Financial planning professor, teacher was telling us that he works with someone that's managing, helping him manage his family's money. Both of those types of jobs, one versus two, I mean, it's really just preference. But that's how I would categorize the types of jobs in finance. So who might be interested? Who might be a good fit for a job in finance? I think the first two items on here are pretty obvious, but the second two might not be. So as I said before, I think having an interest in money is probably the best place to start. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Like I said, I always was, but I know many people who really just could care less about it. Money is a nuisance. Money is hard. Money is complicated. I'm not smart enough, whatever. It's just not their thing, right? They would rather do something than work on, the second step of, okay, now that I've earned money for doing that thing, what am I going to do with it? So I think having that interest is very important. And then math and spreadsheets. So the math side of it, I want to be clear that most math and finance, in my opinion, in my experience, not that hard. So this is not a job that you have to have, take all honors math classes and major in math in college, no fancy calculus or whatever. It's really not that hard. I took math classes. I was okay at it. But it was not I wouldn't say it was my thing. It's not like my parents would say that Jonathan was such a great math student. It really wasn't. But you have to like it enough to because you're going to be in it all day. And same thing with spreadsheets. I mean, that is the platform. Microsoft Excel is still, 20 or 30 years later, that is the platform that most financial analysts use. So you have to kind of be into it. So, we got a potential engineer in the room. I mean, you have to have that mindset and kind of like that in order to like this job and be successful at it. It's just, it's just important. So the point of that is like, if you're not interested in those things, I would stay away. Communications are actually really important in finance as well, because the numbers help outline a story, but you are the storyteller, and numbers can tell a number of different stories. And when you are looking at an investment, when you're looking at a transaction, when you're looking at financial statements of a company, you're looking at numbers, but you have to be able to communicate what those numbers mean to someone. So you need to be able to do that, especially in written form. Many of the lending jobs I had, any deal I was working on, I'd be writing 20 pages, 30 pages. Have some spreadsheets in there, but it's really writing. You need to communicate your belief in the deal, what your assumptions are, what your predictions of the future, because a lot of finance is predicting the future, and that sounds kind of weird, but that's really what you're doing, and you have to have a compelling case and you need to be able to share that case. So whether it's with the parties that are involved in the transactions, whether it's with your boss, whether it's with the investment committee, whether it's with the CEO, the higher ups, you have to sell that. So you really have to be very good at writing and also verbally. Yeah.
Do you do it mostly in business write-ups or interpersonal?
It's mostly business write-ups, yes. And then depending on the situation, so a lot of times at banks, there's a hierarchy of approvals. So for smaller transactions, you write up something and maybe you have one person sign off on it. And the higher up it goes, the more risk there is associated with the deal and where the more money is involved, the more approvals there are. And that could go as far as like presenting to a group of people verbally. So that part doesn't happen that often, but I think when you're talking with your colleagues and you're sharing and you're asking questions, you really need to have conviction, and you really need to show that you have thought things out and what you're guessing on and what factually. So communication is actually a really important part. You can come on in. So I think that's probably a little known fact about finance. It's just communication is really important. And then the last thing is introversion. So not a necessity. None of these things are necessities. These are just things that I was thinking about that I think would be, help differentiate who might be a good fit, who might not be a good fit. But finance, I would describe as not a team sport. I would describe it as you are most of the time working at your desk on a spreadsheet, writing something up, digging deep, thinking through things, putting it down in writing, telling the best story you can. And that's a majority of the job. You'll always have a boss, you'll always have colleagues, you'll always have other parties, a buyer or a seller in a transaction, other providers of capital, but majority of the time it's you and it's your brain. And so it's a great remote job of the future, kind of work from home job also. And so I guess my point here is if you're an extrovert, if you're the type of person that people or what get you excited and you always want to be with people, this probably is not going to be in general, not going to be a great fit for you. There are always exceptions to that rule, but this is kind of the work, the studious, headphones on, plug away kind of job. How to get a finance job, a couple things that just came to my mind in case you're interested, what I would suggest. Start earning money now. That's not because you need to be rich. It's not because you need to have a lot of money. It's to get the experience of earning money and B, managing your money. The more you can do that, and whether you're successful at it or you fail at it, the more you learn and the more you can share with potential employers about it. This proves to you, potential employer, why I'm interested. I've done this. I started a lawn mowing business, or I got bar mitzvah money and I invested it in crypto, and blew it all, it all went to zero. Those are all great things. Those are all great experiences to share to prove that, hey, you're interested. Because you guys are going to come out of high school, come out of college, whatever, and you're not going to have experience, and no one expects you to. But to say that I did some stuff on my own on the side just helps prove your interest. Paying attention to the news is really important. This is something that I personally am not good at. I don't watch the news. I don't read the newspaper as much as I should. But the point in this is there's a financial element in any news story that you find. I challenge any of you to come up with, to open the paper or go online, whatever your favorite news outlet is, find a story and prove to me that there's no financial element in it. There is. There always is. There's always a money aspect in it. And seeing that and understanding that and getting into that is will help you as well in terms of thinking about money and starting a career there. Majors, I just put finance, business, or economics. I think those are obvious. I majored in business administration. I ended up getting an MBA later, but nothing to do with being in finance. I actually got an MBA because I thought I wanted to move away from finance. I was hedging my bets. But certainly any of those majors are good. And I would actually, economics might be my favorite major in there because it's the most broad, and there are a lot of economics majors that go on to do tons of other things besides business. Yeah.
Does the economics major kind of encapsulate finance and business, so that you can't say the other way around? Or is that
Yeah, I would say economics doesn't go that far deep into finance per se, but it goes into more broad.
It's more like analyst, right? Economics gets more like an analyst job. That's
not necessarily. I would say anything's possible in any of those things. I would just very simply put, economics is more broad than both business or finance. In other words, you have more options coming away with an econ major, but any of them are good for finance stuff. Yeah.
So a business major, would that also help for anything in that general range?
I think it's a good question and an important point, because the good thing about finance, if you go into finance, like I said, we're talking about money. You're all going to have money. You all maybe have a little bit of money right now. Whatever you do, you're going to make money. This major will help you, or this field will help you figure out what to do with your money, regardless of whether you go into a career in it or not. You may decide to become a chef, but understanding business will help you potentially start your own business. It will also help you decide what to do with any profits you earn and any money you make in the future. So I like it for that reason. But yes, I think to answer your question, a business degree, it will help you in many things in life besides what you end up doing as part of your career. The other two things are more broad, more general, more obvious for kind of any job, but networking is huge. Do people, do your teachers talk to you about networking yet? Okay, it's coming.
Some of them don't.
Okay.
It's just for you kind of have to kind of take your own understanding of high school in general is basically you learning how to do social skills.
Yes, yes, agreed. And networking, college professors are going to cram it down your throat, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But what you're learning in school is half the battle. You get a lot of education from just talking to people, and so you're going to continue to need to do that. The job you get, or the best job you get, may very well come because of someone versus the grades you got. So that's really huge, and it's important in finance just as like it's important in your profession. And then taking initiative is also just really important in life in general. Kudos to Asher. I'll use him as an example for starting this club. This club did not exist until Asher created it. Asher and I don't really know each other that well, but he sent me an email on a whim, and I was glad to accept. So just taking that initiative and taking risks and just doing things and trying things. Super important in life, but they're going to get you far in finance too, because it can be a somewhat competitive field. So you do have to have a little bit of a competitive mindset when you're finding that job, and then when you're trying to excel and grow in that job. All right, so now the kind of guts of the presentation, we'll talk about kind of what my life and my career and the jobs that I've had. So I grew up in New York. I ended up going to the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. for college. Majored in business administration, didn't know what I wanted to do other than I liked money, and that was interesting to me. Towards the end of college, I started thinking more about real estate. Again, I didn't really know much about real estate, but my dad started investing in it, and it kind of seemed cool. There was no real estate major at my school. I don't know if real estate majors exist now at schools. I don't think it's that popular. Maybe they do. So, but there was like one graduate level class because GW was a big enough school to have grad schools. And so I took that grad class, and I decided, all right, this is the best thing I've found so far. This is what I'm going to do. As I was telling these guys before, I wasn't convinced it was going to be my career. I wasn't convinced I was going to love it, but it was the best thing that I found, and that's kind of the way I approached it. And I've done that a lot in my life since then. So nothing wrong with that, guys. You don't have to know your passion today. You don't have to know that dream today. For many people, it never comes. You just do the best with what you have. And so I decided to work in real estate. The job I ended up getting right out of school was for a company called GMAC Commercial Mortgage. GMAC Commercial Mortgage is a subsidiary of General Motors, Detroit, the automotive company. They had an arm. As that company grew, they started providing auto financing, the loan. So you go into the dealer, they'd sell you the car, and they'd give you a loan. That loan came from the subsidiary. That lending arm of that division grew. It was successful, so they started lending on other things besides cars, including real estate. I kind of randomly got this job, and we were doing mortgages. So we were making loans on real estate properties, specifically commercial real estate properties. So that's buildings, not houses, but buildings. And specifically within that, we were doing hotels. We were doing hotels all across the country too. So super niche, super specific job. Right, and it was like, well, it's real estate, it's money, people seem nice, give it a try. I knew nothing about hotels. I didn't really know that much about real estate. Ended up being a great job. A lot to do with the people. It was a small office, but within a very large company, so I felt safe in terms of stability of the company. I wasn't going to get fired if one person made one bad business decision. I felt protected in that sense. And it was a small group that I was working with, and we all got along really well. What the job was, so loan underwriting. Okay, so what happens on a mortgage or what happens with a loan is the person that needs the money finds the company that has the money. They connect, right? And they agree upon terms. So the company representative is usually a salesperson. They say, these are the types of loans we make. This is the type of interest rate. This is what the terms of the loan is going to be generally. And then they shake hands and they say, okay, I agree. We agree on terms. That deal, before the money gets borrowed or gets deployed, goes to an underwriter. So the transaction goes to an underwriter like me. What I was doing was I was investigating that borrower. They said that they had a successful business. They said that they had a great hotel in a great location that was doing this types of business. I was the guy that was fact checking. I went to that hotel. Is it everything they say it is? Let me get an engineering report to understand the condition of the hotel, because I'm not an engineer, so we're going to outsource that. let me get an appraisal done to say an objective third party who's not involved in the transaction to give me a value of what that hotel is, to make sure that I'm not loaning too much money on that property. Let me meet face to face with the borrower, the person, because with any even though we were loaning to businesses, there are people behind those businesses. So let me meet those people. Let me look at their financial statements. Let me look at their resumes. Are these the type of people that we want to be involved with on a transaction? Because when you go into it, when you make a loan, you're basically setting up a partnership. You're stuck with that person. You're stuck with that business, especially if things go wrong. That's the most important. Like, is this the type of company I want to work with? I want to have as a borrower if we have high inflation, if the economy tanks. So it's really an investigator, but with a heavy financial focus, because we're making a loan, we're lending this company money, and we need to understand the income that borrower is going to generate to help repay that loan. They're going to repay that loan in two ways. They're going to repay that loan on an ongoing basis with monthly payments, returning of principal and interest payments, and then they're also going to be providing a lump sum at the end. That's the way those types of loans work. So that was the nature of the job. The picture of the stool is because someone I was working with, a very smart person I was working with in that group, gave a great analogy of the way we looked at transactions as a three-legged stool. Essentially three major components of every transaction that we need to make sure are strong. If even one of them is weak, that stool is compromised, and you don't want to do the deal. Those three elements are the asset itself, the people behind it, the sponsor as we call them, and then the location. And so those were kind of the core of the analysis I was doing, was putting together a 20-page report. And I was basically saying, should we do this deal? Does this deal make sense? How much money are we going to make? What are our worst case scenarios? What are our risks? How are we going to mitigate those risks? And that was essentially the job. Yeah.
Is the location important to ask?
They are all kind of, so I'm going to say no to that, because the asset, I think when I say the asset, it's like the property itself. So if it's a hotel, what amenities does it have? What do the rooms look like? How many rooms are there? Therefore, how much money can they make on any given night? And how does it compare to other hotels in the area? Because that's a major, understanding the market for hotels in a given neighborhood is important. Location is more about, are people actually going to come here? What are we call them demand generators. What are the demand generators, for that hotel? So if there was a hotel here, near campus, or here on Yosemite, you'd have the school campus, which would be a big hotel, be a big demand generator. You'd have various restaurants in the area. You'd have a lot, Greenwood Village is a hub for certain types of businesses. Those are the demand generators for a hotel. So I would say, look, in that sense, they are a little bit different. So that was the job. How that job ended? The bubble bursting. So I began that job in August 2001, 3 weeks before September 11th. Super lucky on my part. So I was able to stick with that job. And then it ended in 2009 when we had the Great Recession. And I don't know how much you guys know about that, but a big part of the financial recession that we had during that time was a real estate bubble bursting. People were heavily invested. I mean, the whole world was heavily invested in real estate. Everyone was seeing their friends make money on real estate transactions. Everyone wanted to get in on the action. And when that happens, things get overvalued, and then the bubble bursts. So when the bubble burst, we couldn't do our jobs anymore. Our company basically, as I like to say, they shut the spigot off. They turned the spigot off. No more lending. Sorry guys, it's too dangerous. The world has changed. We have no idea what's happening. We're not going to make any more loans. And if we can't make any more loans, people like me are useless. So I got laid off from that job, and that's how it ended. But great, really great job. Really great first job too. Skipped one. After that job ended, I was a little, it was fine. The company treated me well, and my life didn't, my life wasn't ruined, but it was a weird thing to go through a layoff. Yeah.
How much was default?
That's a good question. I wasn't there. And I think, we stopped lending, I want to say at like the end of 2008, and then it was March of 2009, I got laid off. So my job for those months, because there was a period where we stopped lending, but I was still working. They basically had all the underwriters become what I call glorified babysitters of the loans to make sure, okay, are these people here? Are all our borrowers? Let's make sure they're paying. If they're not paying, let's find out why they're not paying. If they're not paying, let's think about whether we want to restructure their loans to make it a little bit easier on them, because we're willing to take a little bit of a loss now if it means getting all the money that we're due later on. We're willing to make the sacrifice. Yes, I mean, I'm sure there were lots of defaults. So I was a little sour on real estate because it's like, well, I just got laid off. Maybe if I was in a different, more stable industry, I wouldn't have gotten laid off. I also was convinced, as I was telling you guys earlier, like, I don't know if real estate is for me. I don't know. There might be a better job out there for me. I don't even know if finance is for me. I want to kind of broaden my horizons. That was my goal. Eventually, after a couple weeks or whatever of being laid off, I decided, you know what, let me go back to school. It'll buy me some time to figure out what I want to do next. So I ended up going to Maryland and getting my MBA there. I did that full time. We can talk about the merits of a graduate degree afterwards, but this is not for everyone. Graduate degrees, I really think, are for people that really, really know what they're doing and have a vision of what they're doing. I didn't have that. It was still a great experience for me, and I don't regret it, but graduate education and higher education in general is super expensive. You want to understand the ROI of that investment every single time, even for you guys who I'm sure are highly considering going to college after high school. Even that's not for everyone. A little controversial, so I won't dwell on that too much. But I went back to get my MBA, so I didn't work for 2 years. I was not earning income. I was just in school all the time, and I had some advantages in my life that was able to that allowed me to do that. But I also had money in the bank because I lived below my means for my entire life, and I had a good foundation of personal finance. So I was lucky to be able to do that. At the end of the day, after 2 years, I ended up saying to myself, you know what, I really do like finance. I think I want to stick with it. So it wasn't necessarily a waste of time, but that wasn't really necessarily the outcome I was expecting after 2 years of learning about all other types of things in graduate school. Because an MBA provides you with all sorts of business classes or all sorts of shared, opens up the door to doing a lot of different things. But I said to myself, you know what, finance is for me, and here's why. I like the activities that I get to do on a day-to-day basis in finance. And I would stress to you all to think about that as you're thinking about the job. Subject matter is one thing, so that's really important, and that's what you're going to learn in high school and college, the subject matter. But you need to understand what the day-to-day is of that job. I was talking about extroversion, introversion earlier, about how finance is probably more for introverts. You need to know that about yourself and what's going to suit you, as much as you need to understand the subject matter to find a job that's really going to suit you well. And so that's what I was thinking at the end of my MBA career. So I said I want to do finance. I ended up getting a job at a company called Choice Hotels. Has anyone heard of that?
I think I've probably heard of
Okay.
it.
Yeah, so Choice Hotels is a hotel franchise company, and I was able to get that job partially because I had hotel lending experience. So that company looked at my resume and they said, okay, at least this guy knows hotels. He also knows money, and I was working at the job ended up being in the finance department, so he knows money. But the day-to-day of that job was extremely different than a job being a lender. Job being a lender, you're working on a couple of transactions at a time, buyers, sellers, providers of capital. What's that asset? Working in the finance department of a hotel, the finance department of a company is much different because again, now I go from the provision of capital job to the management of money job. It was different. And so the job at Choice Hotels, the title was Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. Financial planning and analysis, or the acronym is FP&A, is a job that is mostly involved with budgeting for companies. So establishing a budget for the next year and then understanding how the company is performing against that budget. For a small company, it might not even warrant an entire person to do that job, but for a company that was earning generating hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue a year, it's super important because they also had an expense side to all those revenues. Where was that money going? So for me, I remember I got the job and my wife was like, she didn't understand. I don't understand your job title. What is this company doing? I basically was like, well, we spend money, the company spends money, and the company wants to be more proactive in the decisions it makes on how it spends the money. And she's like, well, that's a perfect job for you because you love saying no when I want to spend money. That was kind of the joke at the time. Is like that's perfect for you. That suited me. And so that was kind of an important element for me in terms of why that job fit. Because again, it was kind of the way my personality was managing money. I liked to do that. A couple of things I did there was I would be involved I would be on cross-functional teams where we have a department in the company that wanted to spend a lot of money. They had this new great idea, we want to create a new brand, or we want to update our website, or something that would involve millions of dollars. And normally, the owner of that project would just run with it. And it's like, good luck. Someone would give them the thumbs up, good luck, go spend the money, and we hope it works out well. This company at that time said, you know what, we need someone from finance involved in every one of those decisions because we need to have a budget for that project, and then we need to measure against that budget, make sure, hold these people accountable. Because they said if we updated the website, we'd make $1 million more a month in revenues. Can you prove that? Like, we need to track that. And so I would be on a job like that. So I would be building financial models. I'd be building spreadsheets from scratch. That was something I never did before. But the MBA, the graduate degree, gave me the confidence to do that. So that was one example. Another example, the $250 million. That was about the annual revenue of the company for the years I was there. And we had a model that someone else created that predicted how much revenue we would earn in the next year based on a whole series of variables that people throughout the company would weigh in. And I was kind of the owner of that model. So just kind of a cool thing. It felt really cool, guys, to be in charge of something that was going to predict how much money the company made. That prediction would go into the financial statements and that were broadcast to the whole world of what the future looked like for this company. So to me, that felt cool. That was kind of felt like an accomplishment. I did that job for 2 years. It was a pretty good job. The only reason that ended was because my wife and I decided we wanted to move to Colorado. We were living in DC at the time. My wife's family was here. We had a son. We wanted to grow our family. Didn't have any family in DC. Let's move to Colorado. It seems like a cool place. But great job, great experience. How am I doing on time? 10 more minutes? All right. This is the last chapter in my career thus far. Moved to Colorado. I quit my job. Did not have a job coming into Colorado. My wife quit her job. Did not have a job coming into Colorado. We had some family, so we had some connections. But ultimately, we did a thing that your parents would probably tell you never to do: is don't leave a job before you have a job. But we did it, and the reason we did it was because we had confidence in ourselves. So another lesson. We ultimately said, I spent 6 months during 2013 looking for work. I was living in DC and I was applying to all these jobs in Colorado. It was a different world then. Remote work wasn't really a thing. When they saw a resume come through with a DC address on it, I'm sure 90% of the employers just said, no way, we're not paying to have this person come along, or who is this person? They think that, we don't know this person's story. And so spent 6 months doing that, gave up, and that's when we made the decision, screw it, we're just going to quit, and we're going to go out there because that's our goal, is to be out there. And we did it, and it had a happy ending because my wife found a job. My wife was pregnant, and she had no job. She had done no job search when we got here. She found a job in weeks. It took me close to a year to find a job. I'm just not good at job search, so you should bring someone in to talk about job search because that's not my strength. It took me a long time to find a job, but I did find a great job at CoBank. You guys have probably heard of that. They have a big tower right at I-25 and Arapahoe. And that job was also different. So now moving to a third job that has some similarities, but also some key differences. Business banking. So it's a job that involves making loans to companies, understanding money, loan underwriting, kind of what I did in the first time. But now I'm loaning to a business. I'm not loaning to real estate. So with real estate, it's like you have a fixed asset. You know what your collateral is. It's right there in front of you. It's a building. With businesses, it's much more. Yes. And you really need to understand that business. You really have to do a lot more investigation. Who are the people involved? How are they generating the money? Who are the customers? Will those customers be there tomorrow? What other sources of income do they have? And so it was a different process. The circle in the middle of the slide is what's called the 5 C's of credit. Won't go into it all that much. It's kind of boring if you're not into finance, but this is the way you think about business banking. This the 5 C's of credit. And so it was something new I had to learn in order to be good at my job. But when I started that job, I was very open with them, and I probably didn't even have to ask the question, but I wanted to anyway. I said, okay, you guys know my experience, but you also know I've never done this before. Are you okay with it? Because you're taking a risk on me. I appreciate that you're taking a risk on me. Are you sure you want to do this? And what they said to me, and I had other conversations for other jobs in the same way, they said to me, Jonathan, we like your finance background. We like that you know money. We like that you've done deals before and made loans before. We'll teach you this industry, or we'll teach you this process. That's the easy part. All the stuff you've done for the last 10 to 12 years, that's the hard part. And so that's another lesson for you guys on skills matter. The skills are important. There's always going to be some reason that an employer doesn't think you're 100% perfect for the job, but you have to understand what you're providing. And they believe that my skills were more important than the industry experience, and that worked for me. So I had that job. I was making loans to telecommunications companies, so as big as like Verizon and AT&T at the time, and as small as like the rural, phone company that has 500 subscribers to it. Because CoBank is like primarily an agricultural bank. They lend money across like rural parts of the country, so a lot of small companies. So that job was great, and I eventually got promoted into a manager job, which was so that's the kind of top right slide, is becoming a manager had been like a career goal of mine pretty much from the first year I started working. I knew that was something that I wanted to do. It's not for everyone. Some people could care less about it. Some people avoid it like the plague, but for me, whatever reason, that was cool to me. And so they gave me a job as a manager, and they promoted me, and that was awesome. That was like a dream come true. Until it wasn't. The bottom left guy yelling. I did have a bad boss. That's been pretty much the main reason I ended up leaving CoBank. I was there for 6 or 7 years, and bad bosses. Yeah, bad boss. The people you work with really matter too, and you can love the subject matter and you can love the day-to-day activities, but if you're working with jerks, don't discount that too much. You need to be happy and you need to be appreciated and supported. And I wasn't feeling that way. So I ended up leaving that job. This time I got a job before I quit, and that job was at BOK Financial. So they're a commercial bank based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. They have offices here in Denver. Similarly, so that was business banking, so it was kind of similar, but this time I was lending to, instead of phone companies, cable companies, and I eventually lent to water utilities at CoBank. And I did a lot of different lending at CoBank, which was great from a learning perspective. But at BOK, it was an oil and gas job, loaning to companies that drill oil and sell oil and gas. I didn't know anything about that. Same thing, I had the conversation with the hiring manager. She's like, I know nothing about this, right? Like, are you cool with it? Yeah, we'll teach you, it's all good. And so that job was cool because it allowed me to learn, and it gave me a lot of flexibility to learn, because when you're lending now, if you think about an oil and gas company, what are the assets of an oil and gas company? It's the ownership of the land underneath which there is oil that you will drill. And who the hell knows what's actually underneath there? I certainly don't as a finance guy, but this company employed engineers to constantly study what's under there, constantly study the results of the drilling to find out what quality of oil, how much there is, stuff like that. So it was like an introduction to engineering for me. That was really exciting part of that job. I had a really good boss too. Unfortunately, I got laid off from that job too. The story there was we had a very small team. I was a loan underwriter, just like I was at my first job. So I was underwriting those loans. There were 4 of us. In a matter of 3 weeks, 2 of them quit, and then we had an engineer quit, and the total team was 10 people, so we went from 10 to 7 in like 3 weeks. And this was during the pandemic. And I'm like, what's going on here? Meanwhile, this is a remote job too. So I had been working at my house, not really interacting with these people on a face-to-face basis for most of the time. So I didn't really have good relationships with a lot of them. And so these 3 people leave, and then the decision was made. And then I got laid off, and basically the decision was made. It's like, something's not working here. Maybe the manager, people don't like working here for some reason. Everyone's abandoning ship. Let's just outsource everything. And so that's I think why I got laid off. But kind of a happy ending, because I wasn't super happy at that job, and I was living below my means and was saving a lot of money, and I'm also lucky that I have a wife that works, and the money she makes can support our whole family. So at that point, made the decision, you know what, I'm not really super excited about going back to work. Done it for 17 years. I can use a little break. My wife's got she's the CEO of a nonprofit. She's got a very busy job. Let me take care of the kids. Let me take care of my wife. And so that's what I've been doing a lot of for the last year and a half. I also do a lot of volunteer work where I get to use my finance skills. So I'm on the finance committee of my kids' private school. I am the president of the neighborhood HOA, so we put together a budget every year. You know, I get to do, and I also do a little bit of consulting work too. So I get to use those skills, but not in the traditional 9-to-5 way. And life is pretty good right now. How are we on time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay.
We can
I'll
go
stop
over
there.
it. Yeah.
Well, I'll leave it to questions for now. But that's basically my story. And I was going to talk about financial independence next in terms of how to manage your money so that you're not a slave to your boss, you're not a slave to your job for your entire career, so that you don't have to work 40 years if you don't want to, just to have enough to retire to stop working. Because I'm really interested in that stuff, but I'll pause. What questions do you guys have about working in finance? I answered them all, didn't I? Yeah.
Were there any like large hurdles to getting into finance? Like,
Yes.
finding a job?
So I'll go back. I talked about this a little bit in the beginning in terms of my advice on how to get a finance job. But I think I mean, I don't know what the market is like now, but I really feel like finance is a future-proof job. So I think there will always be jobs there. I don't think you'll need to fight to find a job. You won't need to fight to create a job for yourself. I think money rules, and there will always be demand for money. But I think, you know, showing an interest and or having the college major is going to be really helpful. Don't think you need to go to you don't need to go to an Ivy League school. You don't need to be the best math student in class. Just take that interest, take those classes. Aside from that, I don't think there's any major barriers. The jobs that I had were corporate jobs, so working for big companies. You kind of have to be willing to do that too. That's not for everyone. Some people really want to be their own bosses, or they just like the small group thing. I think more of the opportunities are out in the corporate world. So get some corporate experience, and then that'll help you narrow down kind of what you like and what you want to do next. But that's a good question.
So like right now, I'm taking like a personal finance.
Awesome.
So that
Awesome.
would that really help transmute into?
I think that's a great starting place. Yes, because it all it's the same thing. It's you're in that class. You're talking about managing your own money. In the real world, and some of the jobs I had, you're just talking about other people's money, but the fundamentals are the same. So if you can get a good handle on managing your own money, you're ahead of the game in terms of life in general. But most people don't do that very well. But you're also ahead of the game in terms of how to think about managing a company's money. So yeah, you guys should all take that class. I mean, I don't know anything about it, or the teacher or whatever, but it's like a life skill. And again, I'll go back to the point I made earlier about understanding money is going to be helpful to you in your life for the rest of your life, regardless of what career you choose, because you're going to have money and you're going to want to be responsible with it. What else? Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to present to you guys. And Asher's got my email address. If anyone has questions or wants to follow up with me, happy to talk more.
Let's get this saved and